Today, I'm going to tell you about the most horrific radiation disasters that have ever occurred. Radithor, the radioactive energy drink. In the 1920s in the United States, there existed a very special type of energy drink called Radithor. At that time, radium was hailed as a miracle cure-all by the medical community, and Radithor was heavily advertised as a medicine that could cure any ailment and restore vitality, even promising eternal youth. Many considered it a luxury elixir that only the elite and aristocracy of the time could afford. But the truth was that each small bottle of Radithor contained radium-226 and radium-228, two extremely dangerous radioactive substances. Eben Byers, a wealthy businessman and former golf champion, became the most famous victim of Radithor in 1927. After falling and breaking his arm, his private doctor advised him to use a miracle medicine named Radithor to help him recover faster. Having absolute faith in the advertisements, Eben didn't just use this medicine for healing. He drank it regularly every day as a sort of revitalizing water. Every day he downed about 3 bottles, continuing this habit for several years. In total, the amount of medicine he consumed was estimated at around 1,400 bottles. Initially, Eben truly felt his body becoming stronger and his spirit more uplifted. His body felt full of energy, but that feeling was short-lived. Radium gradually accumulated in his bones, silently destroying his body from the inside out. Eben's bones began to rot. His lower jaw became necrotic. His teeth fell out one by one, and terrifying holes appeared in his skull. It reached a point where people said a mere light touch could shatter pieces of his bone. These are some terrifying images of his condition. In March 1932, Eben Byers passed away in agony at the age of 51. Following this horrific death, the US government banned Radithor and tightened pharmaceutical regulations. The Demon Core. The Demon Core was a spherical plutonium core manufactured by the United States after World War II. It was designed to be the heart of an atomic bomb. In 1946, at the Los Alamos Nuclear Laboratory, there was a special safety device called a tamper. It was a protective metal dome designed to reflect neutrons so that the plutonium core wouldn't reach a supercritical state. According to safety regulations, a shim was always supposed to be inserted between the protective layer and the core. However, Louis Slotin, a reckless scientist who disliked following rules, chose a faster way. He used a flathead screwdriver to maintain the gap between the protective dome and the plutonium core. A few colleagues saw this and joked that he was tickling the dragon's tail. While Slotin was using the screwdriver to keep the shell and the core apart, a fatal mistake occurred. The screwdriver accidentally slipped from Slotin's hand. The protective dome immediately slammed shut. This instantly pushed the demon core into a supercritical state. The room immediately flashed with a deadly blue light. In less than a second, Slotin used his bare hand to flip the upper hemisphere off, separating the plutonium core from its supercritical state. In that brief moment, 3 quadrillion fission reactions took place. To visualize this, each fission reaction is like a neutron bullet fired at extreme speed. 3 quadrillion reactions are equivalent to 3 quadrillion invisible bullets flying wildly throughout the laboratory. These bullets pierced through human bodies, destroying every cell and almost completely burning the DNA in his body. His body immediately collapsed. As for Louis Slotin, he was the person standing closest to the demon core, taking the full brunt of the neutron bullet storm. In just seconds, the DNA in Slotin's cells was torn apart, and his blood vessels and soft tissues began to fail. He felt a horrific heat coursing through his body, like being burned from inside his bones. After 1 to 2 days, Slotin's condition deteriorated rapidly. His white blood cell count plummeted, his immune system was virtually wiped out, his internal organs suffered heavy hemorrhaging, and his skin began to fall off in patches. By the 5th day, Slotin's body began to swell, and his skin turned a pale blue and then bruised purple. His internal organs gradually stopped functioning due to mast cell destruction. After 9 days, Slotin passed away. He died at the age of 35. His colleagues fortunately survived. The lesson learned is, never play with the demon core. Wait, let me try. The Chernobyl Disaster. In 1986, in a small town called Pripyat in the former Soviet Union, there was a power plant named Chernobyl. But unlike coal or hydroelectric plants, Chernobyl generated electricity using something invisible and extremely dangerous: nuclear energy. Inside Chernobyl, there were 4 reactors. They operated using uranium-235, an element capable of breaking itself apart in a process called nuclear fission. That process generates extreme heat. That heat is used to boil water, creating steam to spin turbines. And that's how electricity is made. It sounds modern and smart. But there was a problem. The very thing they were using to light up an entire city could also kill people silently through radiation. On the night of April 25, 1986, engineers at reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant conducted what seemed like a harmless experiment. They were testing whether, in the event of a sudden power loss, the turbines would still spin long enough to supply power to the cooling system. But to perform the test, they disabled most of the safety systems and lowered the reactor's power to an extremely low level, causing the reactor to fall into a state of severe instability below safety limits. When the situation began to worsen, they pressed the AZ5 button, an emergency shutdown button. But due to a design flaw, it caused the reactor's power output to spike to a maximum level, causing the nuclear power plant to explode instantly. On the night of April 26, 1986, an earth-shattering explosion tore through the quiet atmosphere of the city of Pripyat. Reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant had exploded. Red-hot radioactive fuel fragments scattered everywhere. Residents living around there didn't know that a giant radiation cloud, 400 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, was silently spreading across Europe. 2 people died that night, which doesn't sound too horrific, but the consequences it left behind were absolutely devastating, far beyond any imagination. In the following weeks, dozens of people, mostly firefighters and workers, passed away due to acute radiation exposure. It is estimated that up to 600,000 people were exposed to high levels, and more than 5 million people living in the affected zone suffered long-term health effects. Thousands of cases of thyroid cancer, birth defects, and psychological disorders appeared in the years that followed. An entire city had to be permanently evacuated. Pripyat, a crowded city that was once vibrant with over 50,000 residents, has been abandoned forever. The Goiânia Disaster. Have you ever imagined that because of a tiny stone, an entire city would have to be evacuated? This is what happened in Brazil in 1987. The story began at an old, abandoned hospital in the city of Goiânia. Inside that abandoned hospital, there was a device used for cancer radiation therapy. Some medical equipment was left empty. No one watched over them or warned about them. 2 scavengers named Roberto and Wagner sneaked in and found the radiotherapy machine. They didn't know that inside that machine was an extremely dangerous substance called cesium-137, a powerful radioactive isotope used in medicine. Roberto took the radiotherapy machine to the junkyard of Mr. De Vere, a junkyard owner who lived with his wife Gabriella and his 6-year-old niece named Lida. De Vere and 2 of his employees dismantled the radiotherapy machine. De Vere saw a type of glowing blue powder in the core. He thought he had just found a gemstone or treasure. De Vere scraped some off and put it in a box. At night, the whole family gathered around to admire the beauty of this magical light. De Vere even shared it with friends and neighbors to see, completely unaware that every tiny speck of dust was a dose of death. De Vere's wife was mesmerized by this glowing powder. She used her fingers to dab the cesium powder and applied it to her face as if it were makeup. Meanwhile, De Vere's niece, Lady, frequently played near the cesium and touched it with her bare hands. After playing, she didn't have the habit of washing before eating or going to sleep. In the following days, symptoms began to appear clearly. De Vere's wife started feeling nauseous, dizzy, and fatigued. Not long after, her mouth turned red with sores, and the skin on her hands blistered as if she had just been burned by boiling water. Meanwhile, little Lida, only 6 years old, began to run a constant high fever, and her whole body became weak. Despite being a mischievous and active little girl, Lida now just lay in one place, her body weakening, her skin turning pale, and her voice becoming faint. Doctors initially thought it was a strange infectious disease. It wasn't until nearly 2 weeks later, when a woman with strange symptoms came to the hospital, that doctors suspected this was no ordinary illness. They called the Brazilian Nuclear Energy Commission, and within hours, emergency response teams arrived. They discovered radiation levels in the residential area were thousands of times higher than allowed. Immediately, more than 100,000 people were sent for radiation testing, of whom 249 were seriously affected by radiation. Hundreds of houses in Goiânia were demolished, and soil was dug up to completely remove the radioactive material. Every contaminated item was buried deep as nuclear waste. This disaster claimed the lives of 4 people, including little Leda, Mrs. Gabriella, and 2 of Mr. de Vere's employees. The reason was attributed to them being the ones who had the most contact with the cesium-137. Truly sad, isn't it? The Radium Girls disaster. Between 1917 and 1920 in the United States, radium was viewed as a magical material. Watch painting factories began using paint containing radium to make numbers glow in the dark. Hundreds of young women flocked to this job. These girls were called the Radium Girls. Their job was to paint fine lines on watch faces using ink containing radium. To keep the brush tips sharp, the girls were instructed to lick the brush head every time they painted. And so, day after day, they swallowed particles of radium into their bodies without knowing it. Initially, the radium made them look strangely radiant. Their skin and clothes glowed faintly in the dark. They danced happily, looking like glowing angels. But then the nightmare began. After a while, many girls started experiencing severe toothaches. Their jawbones rotted, and their teeth fell out one by one. Some suffered from crumbling leg and hip bones after only minor impacts. The reason was that radium had replaced the calcium in their bones. When a doctor pressed lightly on one girl's jaw, it immediately detached from her body. Dozens of women died in horrific pain. A historic lawsuit later exposed the truth. The companies knew perfectly well about the dangers of radium, but deliberately hid them. Thanks to their sacrifice, industrial radiation safety standards were finally tightened. But for the Radium Girls, it seemed everything was too late. The world's most irradiated man. On September 30th, 1999, at the Tokaimura nuclear fuel processing facility in Japan, 3 workers named Hisashi Ouchi, Masato Shinohara, and Yutaka Yokokawa performed a dangerous task. They were preparing uranium fuel for a reactor, but due to negligence, they poured an excessive amount of uranium into a precipitation tank, leading to an out-of-control chain reaction. Hisashi Ouchi, being closest to the center of the reaction, received a radiation dose of up to 17 sieverts. If you didn't know, just 2 sieverts is enough to be fatal without emergency care, and above 6 sieverts, there is almost no chance of survival. Ouchi's entire body was destroyed at the cellular level. His white blood cell count was nearly 0. His immune system vanished completely, and his skin peeled off in patches. His internal organs began to fail. And the most terrifying part is that even though his body was severely destroyed, the Japanese government ordered that his life be maintained at all costs, for the purpose of research and to maintain an international image. Ouchi was continuously infused with more than 20 liters of blood every day. He received stem cell transplants and multiple skin grafts. Although he was anesthetized, Ouchi was in a state of constant, extreme agony. His body continuously leaked fluids through his wounds. Aware of his condition, Ouchi repeatedly begged the doctors to let him go, as he did not want to endure the daily torture. Despite his constant crying and pleading, the doctors remained determined to prolong his life as if he were a laboratory specimen. On the 83rd day, Hisashi Ouchi passed away due to cardiac arrest. Every function in his body had been completely exhausted. The second man, named Shinohara, also died a few months later. Yokokawa received a lighter dose and fortunately survived. This incident shocked all of Japan and the international scientific community because of its inhumanity. Hisashi had to endure painful torture for 83 days just to serve an experiment. And those are the most horrific radiation disasters that have ever existed. The information in this video was gathered by me from the internet. If there are any errors or if you have any feedback, please comment in the section below. If you found the video interesting, don't forget to give me a like and subscribe.